There's a lot of hype on the internet following the announcement of the A7R4. However, a lot of the questions I'm seeing people ask aren't actually related to the R4 itself. They're more questions like, what's happened to the A7S III? Does this now mean we're going to see the A7 IV? And will the A7 IV have a higher resolution, like 30 megapixels or more? But before we get into that, there's two other questions you might be asking. Firstly, Dave, does your voice sound a little different today? Yes, I've actually had a filling fall out, so now my mouth feels really weird. And secondly, you're thinking, Dave, I don't care about A7 IVs or teeth. Where's the dog? Because let's face it, we all know that's the only reason you've actually come to this video. Well, don't worry. Rust, come here. Your people wish to see you. There we go. So first question, what happened to the A7S III? Well, I actually think this is in part linked to why we've seen the A7R4. Now, Casey over at Camera Conspiracies, who we all know it has links to dimensions far beyond that of what most average humans do, he speculates the reason why we saw the R4 first is because they've not improved the video specs, whereas the A7S III and the A7 IV likely will have better video specs, so they didn't want to release the cameras with the better video specs and then release one with the same video specs. That might be the case. But I actually think the reason is linked more to the enlarged body of the A7R4. Well, the rumours of the A7S III so far is that it will be able to shoot 4K at 60 frames a second and have 10-bit video as well. But Sony keep talking about exceeding people's expectations and wanting the A7S III to be this wonder camera. Well, Panasonic released the S1H. That can do 6K internal recording. But the Panasonic is using the Sony sensor, so obviously Sony have the capability of doing 6K recording. The A7 III currently does 6K, but it downsamples that to 4K. So I would say we're likely going to see the A7S III be able to shoot 6K as well. But given how close to the limit the A7 III is in shooting its 4K at the moment, I don't think it's possible to be able to do 6K with an A7 III style body, which would make sense given that Sony postponed it in the first place. Now, Panasonic, when they released the S1H, said that they had to enlarge the body over the original S1 in order to control the heat management better. And Sony's enlarged the body of the A7R4. Partly that might be ergonomics, but I think more likely it's also linked to the A7S III's ability to shoot 6K recording. But I doubt Sony would want to bring out this brand new style body with the better ergonomics in the S line first. In the past, Sony's always gone A7 and the A7R and then the S to follow. So I think that's why Sony have gone with the R first, and then they'll follow on with the A7 IV and the A7S III. There is questions people keep asking, will this be called the A7S III or the A7S IV because it's going to have a 4th generation body? I think it will still be called the S3 because they're individual lines from each other. They're separate camera entities essentially. And even though it might be a bit confusing for people to go, hang on, the A7S III has a 4th generation body, I think it's going to be more confusing for people to go, hang on, we had the S1 and the S2 and then the S4, what happened to the S3? At the end of the day, it doesn't really make that much of a difference though, because it's just a name. So when might we see all of this happen? Well, I'm going to go on a bit of a limb here. Not like me, I know. The A7 III was announced 5 months after the announcement of the A7R III. So if we go with the 5-month time frame again, that would put us around about November. So we could see the A7 IV announced just in time for pre-orders at Christmas, which would make sense as well. Which would fit with what I keep seeing on Sony Alpha rumors, that the S3 and the A9 Mark II aren't going to be announced until next year. Although Sony Alpha rumors didn't know about the R4 until about 3 hours before it was released, so what do they know? But I do think the S3 and the A9 Mark II will be announced next year. Next year is a Photokina year, and you've obviously got NAB in February as well. So maybe A7 IV announced in November, A7S III, A9 Mark II early next year. That's my predictions, purely a guess. Now, the fun part in terms of specifications of the A7 IV. So do I think the A7 IV will have a higher resolution sensor than the 3? Yes, I do. Namely because, well, we've had 24 megapixels in the A7 since the start. So we had the A7S and the S2 both at 12 megapixels. All the A7s have been 24 megapixels, but the R keeps increasing. We had 36 in the first gen, 42 in the second and third, and now we've got 60 megapixels in the fourth generation. So there's this huge gap opening up. Now, if the prediction of the S3 being able to shoot 6K is correct, that is going to need a 24 megapixel sensor because 6K is 24 megapixels. So I doubt Sony are going to want to have two cameras at 24 megapixels and then one at 60. It's too much of a gap. Plus, if they bring the A7S III up to 24 megapixels and then leave the A7 IV at 24 megapixels, how do they improve it? If they improve the video features, is it going to be too close to the S series? If they improve just the stills features in terms of shooting speed, is it going to be too close to the A9? So logic would be increase the resolution, would separate the cameras apart back to what we were used to in the first and second generations. So what resolution do they go for? Well, 8 months ago when the rumours of those new sensors came out, one of which turned out to be the 60 megapixel sensor that we now see in the R4, there was another one that was 36 megapixels, which had really good potential performance at least, that was at the time I thought an ideal candidate for the A9 Mark II. Well, the original A9 has a 24 megapixel sensor the same as the A7 III. Basically, the A7 III has like a watered down version of the A9 sensor. So if we're going to see a 36 megapixel sensor in the A9 Mark II, I think we will see a watered down version of that in the A7 IV. So we'd have 24 megapixel A7S III, 36 megapixel A7 IV, 60 megapixel A7R4. But that's just my thoughts and opinions. I will apologise for Rusty's absence as well. He's currently flaked out on the floor here. It's rather warm today, and yeah, you've had enough, haven't you? Rust, come on. Hey, I know it's warm. I know. Too hot, isn't it? Yes. But what do you make of it all? What do you think the specs of the A7 IV are going to be? Do you think we'll see the A7 IV before or after a replacement to the S2? And do you think the replacement is going to be called the S3 or the S4? Leave your thoughts and comments in the box down below. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.